The first warning wasn't the toll booth. It was the traffic cone. One orange cone, placed right in the middle of a bridge that thousands of people used every week. Nobody knew who put it there. Nobody knew why. At first, drivers simply moved around it. Then a second cone appeared. Then a folding chair. Then a handwritten sign. Bridge access fee required. Most people thought it was a joke. A prank. Something that would disappear by the next morning. It didn't. 3 days later, a man was standing on the bridge collecting cash from residents trying to get home. And somehow, the HOA was backing him. What nobody knew was that the bridge wasn't HOA property anymore. 6 months earlier, after a messy foreclosure sale and a chain of legal mistakes, I had purchased the only bridge connecting the neighborhood to the main county road. $5 million. A deal so strange that even my attorney thought the paperwork had to be wrong. But it wasn't. The bridge was mine. Legally. Recorded. Insured. Verified by the county. The HOA board knew it. Their lawyers knew it. The title company knew it. But one board member refused to accept it. A man who had spent years controlling every decision inside that neighborhood. A man who believed rules only applied to everyone else. And when he discovered he no longer controlled the bridge, he made a decision that would eventually bring sheriff's deputies to the scene. Handcuffs. Criminal charges. And a courtroom packed with angry homeowners. Because what started with a traffic cone was about to become one of the most expensive HOA mistakes that neighborhood had ever seen. And the toll booth was only the beginning. The next morning, the toll booth was still there. Not a temporary table. Not a folding stand. A real booth. Wood framing. A small roof. A sliding window. Someone had spent money building it. A lot of money. The bridge sat at the entrance to a gated community outside Jacksonville, Florida. Nearly 400 homes. One entrance. One exit. And that bridge connected everything to the county road. Without it, residents faced a detour of almost 20 miles. People noticed immediately. Morning traffic backed up before sunrise. Work trucks sat idle. Parents trying to reach schools became trapped in line. Nobody understood what was happening. Then they saw him. A member of the HOA board. Standing beside the booth, holding a receipt book, collecting cash. $5 per crossing, $10 for commercial vehicles. The reactions were immediate. Several homeowners refused. Arguments started. Voices rose. Cars began turning around. Others paid simply because they needed to get to work. Nobody wanted trouble, but everyone wanted answers. My phone started ringing before 8 o'clock. At first I assumed someone was joking. Then another call came in. Then another. Then a contractor I knew personally sent photos. The booth was real. The fee signs were real. And the man collecting money was absolutely real. I drove there immediately. The line of vehicles stretched farther than I expected. People were angry. Windows rolled down. Drivers shouting. Several residents stood on the roadside recording everything. The board member looked completely comfortable. Like he owned the place. Like this had been his plan all along. When I parked and walked toward the bridge, he spotted me instantly. His expression changed. Not surprise. Not concern. Annoyance. As though I was interrupting him. That caught my attention. Because by then, every document had already been recorded. The transfer was complete. The bridge belonged to me. There was no legal question. No gray area. No pending dispute. Nothing. Yet he acted like ownership didn't matter. I asked him one question. Who approved this? His answer was short. The board. Several homeowners standing nearby heard it. They exchanged confused looks. One resident immediately spoke up. He said there had never been a community vote. Another resident agreed. Then another. Within seconds, several homeowners were demanding explanations. The board member ignored them. Instead, he pointed at the toll sign, and told everyone the fee was mandatory. That only made things worse. A local delivery driver refused to pay. The board member stepped in front of the truck. Traffic stopped completely. More vehicles piled up. Someone called the sheriff. Someone else called the county. A third resident contacted a local television station. The situation was spiraling fast. Then something strange happened. One of the HOA directors arrived. Another board member. A man named Richard. He looked genuinely shocked. The moment he saw the toll booth, his face went pale. That got my attention, because Richard wasn't known for showing emotion. Yet there he was, staring at the structure, almost speechless. He walked directly toward the board member. They moved away from the crowd, but not far enough. Several residents could still hear pieces of the conversation, and what they heard created even more confusion. Richard kept repeating one sentence. "You weren't supposed to do this." Over and over. "You weren't supposed to do this." The board member looked irritated. Not worried, just irritated. As though Richard was creating unnecessary problems. That exchange changed everything, because now it was obvious something had happened behind closed doors. Something the homeowners didn't know. Something even certain board members didn't know. People started asking questions. Lots of questions. The answers never came. The board member simply continued collecting money, as if nothing had happened. By noon, social media groups across the neighborhood were exploding. Photos spread everywhere. Residents posted copies of receipts. Others shared videos. Some homeowners demanded emergency board meetings. Others threatened lawsuits. One resident claimed he had already contacted a real estate attorney. The pressure kept building. Then came another surprise. The county showed up. 2 officials. Both carrying clipboards. Both visibly concerned. They inspected the bridge. Photographed the booth. Measured distances. Took notes. The board member tried speaking with them. Neither seemed interested. They spent nearly an hour examining everything. Then they left, without saying a word. The uncertainty made everyone nervous. Especially the homeowners. Nobody knew what the county had found. Nobody knew what would happen next. But rumors spread quickly. Some residents believed the booth violated permitting requirements. Others believed the bridge itself was subject to easement agreements. One man claimed the county could order immediate removal. Another insisted the board member would be personally liable. Nobody knew the truth. Not yet. Meanwhile, the toll booth remained open. The fees continued. And the line of angry residents grew longer. By late afternoon, something unexpected happened. A retired engineer from the neighborhood approached me. He introduced himself, then quietly handed me a folder. Inside were copies of documents. Old documents. Very old. Some dating back decades. At first glance, they looked unimportant. Property maps. Development plans. Construction records. Nothing dramatic. Then I noticed one page. A page that shouldn't have been there. A signed maintenance agreement. The bridge. The HOA. And another party. A party nobody had mentioned. Not once. I read the name twice. Then a third time. The engineer nodded. He could tell I had noticed it. According to those records, the HOA's authority over the bridge had always been far more limited than homeowners realized. Far more limited. The implications were enormous. If the documents were accurate, the toll booth wasn't just questionable. It could trigger consequences nobody expected. I asked where he found them. His answer was simple. County archives. Public records. Available for years. Yet somehow ignored. Or hidden. Neither possibility felt reassuring. That evening, residents packed the community clubhouse. The emergency meeting overflowed. Standing room only. Tensions were high. Homeowners wanted answers. The board member finally appeared. So did the HOA attorney. The atmosphere immediately changed. People expected explanations. Instead, they got something else. The attorney looked nervous. Very nervous. He shuffled papers repeatedly, avoided eye contact, and seemed determined not to answer direct questions. Residents noticed. The frustration became obvious. One homeowner demanded to know whether the board had authorized toll collection. No clear answer. Another asked whether permits existed for the structure. Again, no clear answer. A third resident demanded financial records. Silence. The room grew louder, then louder still. The board member finally stood. Everyone expected a defense. What they got instead stunned the room. He claimed the toll booth was necessary to protect community assets. Nobody understood what that meant, not even the attorney. The explanation raised more questions than answers. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Richard stood up, the same board member who had confronted him earlier. His voice was shaking, not with fear, with anger. He announced that he had never approved any toll booth, never approved any fees, and never authorized construction on the bridge. The room exploded. Residents began shouting. Several board members started arguing among themselves. The attorney looked trapped, like he had just realized the situation was much worse than expected. Then Richard revealed one final detail, a detail that instantly silenced the room. The toll booth hadn't been built by the HOA. The money hadn't come from HOA accounts. And according to information he had received that morning, the board member had allegedly paid for the entire structure himself. The crowd went quiet, completely quiet, because if that was true, this wasn't an HOA project anymore. It was something very different, something personal, something potentially dangerous. And as the meeting ended in chaos, a sheriff's deputy entered the clubhouse carrying a folder. A folder containing information nobody in that room was prepared to hear. The sheriff's deputy didn't speak at first. He just stood at the back of the room, holding a sealed folder. That silence hit harder than any argument before it. The HOA attorney straightened up immediately, like he already knew what was inside. Residents noticed that reaction, and the room shifted again. People stopped shouting. Even the board member went quiet for the first time. The deputy finally walked forward. Slow. Controlled. He placed the folder on the table. Didn't open it yet. Just looked around the room. He asked one simple question. Who authorized construction on the bridge structure? No one answered. Not immediately. The attorney adjusted his tie. The board member looked at the floor. Then Richard spoke again. His voice was sharper now. He said again that no formal vote had ever taken place, and that no record existed in HOA minutes. That should have ended things. But it didn't, because the deputy then said something that changed the atmosphere completely. He said the county had been alerted to unauthorized commercial activity on restricted infrastructure. Those words landed heavy. Commercial activity. That meant money. That meant transactions. That meant records. The board member finally tried to respond, but the deputy raised a hand. Not aggressive, just final. He said they would review everything first. Then he opened the folder. Inside were printed transaction logs, handwritten receipts, and photographs. The first photo showed the toll booth. The second showed the board member collecting cash. The third showed something no one expected. A second set of receipts. Different handwriting. Different dates. Older. Several homeowners leaned forward, trying to understand. The deputy didn't explain. He didn't need to. Because the implication was already clear. This wasn't a single-day incident. It had been happening longer than anyone thought. The room erupted again. But this time it wasn't anger. It was confusion. A resident demanded to know how long this had been going on. The deputy still didn't answer. He just kept flipping pages. Then he paused. That pause mattered. He stared at one document longer than the rest, then quietly closed the folder, and said one sentence. This is not a simple HOA violation. The attorney exhaled sharply, like he had been holding his breath for hours. The board member finally spoke again, but his voice was different now, less confident. He claimed the structure was temporary. He said it was for traffic management. Nobody believed him anymore. Not after the receipts. Not after the photos. Not after the deputy's tone. Richard stepped forward again. He pointed at the folder, and asked if the county had confirmed ownership of the bridge. The deputy didn't answer directly. Instead, he said they were verifying multiple filings. That word stood out. Multiple. Not one. Not simple. Multiple filings meant conflicting claims. Or worse. Manipulated records. A murmur ran through the room. People started looking at each other, trying to make sense of it. One resident whispered that something had been altered in the registry. Another said he had seen inconsistencies in tax records years ago but ignored them. The tension turned into something else now. Suspicion. Not just toward the board member. Toward the entire HOA system. The deputy finally turned a page and stopped again. This time he looked directly at me. That moment felt deliberate. He asked if I was the owner of record for the bridge. I confirmed it. The room reacted instantly. Confusion returned. The board member suddenly laughed. Not loudly, but sharply, like he couldn't believe it. He said the county had already acknowledged HOA jurisdiction over access rights. That was the first real contradiction. The deputy didn't react. He simply said that jurisdiction and ownership were not the same thing. That distinction changed everything again. The attorney finally spoke. His voice was low, careful. He asked for clarification on easement rights. The deputy said those documents were under review. Then he added something that made the room go still again. He said there was evidence suggesting the easement may have been misrepresented in prior filings. Misrepresented. Not missing. Not unclear. Misrepresented. That word hit harder than anything before it. The board member's expression changed. For the first time, he looked unsettled. Not angry. Not defensive. Just unsettled. Richard noticed it immediately. He stepped closer, and asked if someone had modified legal access records without authorization. The deputy didn't answer. Instead, he closed the folder again, and said they had requested digital backups from the county server system. That statement caused a ripple in the room, because digital backups meant timestamps, audit trails, history logs, things that don't lie easily. The board member suddenly interrupted. He said the HOA had nothing to do with county systems. The deputy agreed, then said that was exactly why the issue was serious. Because interference appeared to have originated from within the HOA's own filing submissions. That was the first mini-twist. Not just misuse. Potential alteration of official submissions. The room went loud again, but not in chaos. In realization. People started connecting pieces on their own. The booth, the receipts, the conflicting authority claims, the sudden construction, the unexplained confidence from one board member. Everything started forming a pattern, but no one said it out loud yet. The deputy stepped back slightly, and finally said what everyone had been waiting for. Some of the transactions tied to the toll booth activity may have entered official financial reporting channels. That meant taxes. That meant banking records. That meant federal attention. The attorney immediately looked down, like he wanted to disappear. The board member looked at him, for the first time with real tension. Not leadership. Not control. Pressure. The deputy then added one more detail. The county had received a separate notice earlier that day, from a federal oversight office. That notice referenced unverified infrastructure revenue collection. Nobody understood it fully, but everyone understood enough. This was no longer just HOA conflict. It was expanding beyond the neighborhood, fast, and uncontrollably. Then the deputy did something unexpected. He asked for the board member to step outside. Just for questioning. No handcuffs yet. No arrest. Just a request. but the tone made it clear it wasn't optional. The board member hesitated. For the first time since this began, he looked at Richard, then at the attorney, then at the residents, and finally at the bridge owner, me. That pause lasted too long. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, and pulled out something no one expected to see, a second set of keys. Keys labeled with the bridge code. And in that moment, the deputy's expression changed. Because those keys should not have existed. And what he said next made the entire room freeze. "Where did you get access to that lock system?" The board member didn't answer. He just looked at the door, like he was deciding whether to leave or run. And outside, near the bridge entrance, sirens suddenly started approaching the neighborhood again. The sirens got closer fast. Too fast for comfort. Every head in the room turned toward the windows. Red and blue lights started washing across the clubhouse walls. The deputy didn't move. He just kept his eyes on the board member, waiting. The tension tightened again, like the room had been pulled into something larger than it could hold. Outside, vehicles screeched to a stop near the bridge entrance. Doors slammed shut. Multiple units arrived at once. Not just a single patrol. More like coordinated response. That detail hit everyone at the same time. A coordinated response meant prior notice. Or prior concern. The board member finally exhaled. Slow. Controlled. Then he placed the bridge keys on the table. That sound was small, but it carried. The deputy stared at them for a long moment, then asked again, "Where did you get access to this system?" This time the board member answered, "Barely." He said he was authorized for maintenance oversight. The attorney immediately shook his head. Hard. That contradiction landed instantly. Maintenance oversight didn't include encrypted access keys or bridge lock systems tied to county-controlled infrastructure. Richard stepped forward again. His voice was firm now. He said the board member had never been assigned any infrastructure responsibilities. Not once in recorded minutes. That detail made people shift in their seats. Because now it wasn't confusion. It was documentation against behavior. The deputy finally picked up the keys, examined them closely, then said something that changed the temperature in the room again. These keys were not issued by the county. A pause followed. Then he added something worse. They were not part of any registered lock system inventory. That meant one thing. Unauthorized duplication, or unauthorized system entry. The board member suddenly spoke louder. He said the HOA had purchased hardware upgrades months ago. He said everything was approved internally, but no one backed him up. Not Richard, not the attorney, not a single board member in the room. That silence became louder than any argument. Outside, another siren passed. Then another. Now there were multiple units positioned across the bridge entrance. Blocking access. Blocking exit. A resident near the door whispered that no one was being allowed in or out. That changed the mood again. Containment. Not just investigation. Containment. The deputy finally stepped away from the table. He moved toward the exit, and signaled 2 officers outside. The board member watched carefully, then tried to follow. But one officer stepped into the doorway, blocking him. Not aggressively, just firmly. That was the first physical restriction, the first real boundary. The attorney leaned toward Richard, whispering something about exposure and liability. Richard didn't respond. He was staring at the keys, like he had just realized something deeper, something still forming. Then a new officer entered the clubhouse, carrying a second folder, thicker than the first. He handed it directly to the deputy, without speaking. That small exchange made the entire room tighten again. The deputy opened it immediately, flipped through pages faster this time. Less hesitation, more urgency. Then he stopped abruptly, looked up, and asked the board member if he had ever authorized third-party access to county infrastructure systems. The board member froze. For the first time. Not defensive, not dismissive, Frozen. Then he said no. Too quickly. Too cleanly. The deputy nodded slowly, like he had expected that answer. Then he showed him a printed log page. It contained timestamps, access entries, bridge control system activity, all tied to an account ID. The board member leaned forward, trying to see, and that's when the mini twist landed. The account ID wasn't registered under his name. It was registered under the HOA attorney's credentials. The attorney reacted instantly. He stepped back, shook his head, and said it was impossible. His voice cracked slightly at the end. That detail hit harder than anything before it, because attorneys don't crack like that under normal questioning. The deputy raised a hand again, not to accuse, to pause everything. He said the log showed repeated access attempts over several weeks. Not just one event, multiple entries, system interactions during overnight hours, and configuration changes tied to bridge control permissions. The attorney kept shaking his head, repeating that he had never accessed any system like that. The room started breaking apart again, not physically, mentally. People didn't know who to believe anymore. The board member suddenly looked toward the attorney, then back at the deputy, like he was calculating something, trying to shift responsibility. Richard noticed it. Immediately, he stepped in front of him, blocking his view. That movement changed everything again. The board member's expression tightened. He said nothing, but his breathing changed. Outside, another announcement came through a loudspeaker. Unclear, but official. Something about securing the perimeter. That phrase spread through the clubhouse instantly. Securing the perimeter. That wasn't HOA language. That was enforcement language. Then the deputy turned slightly, and gave a quiet instruction to the officers. The board member was to be detained temporarily for questioning. Still no handcuffs. But the intention was final. 2 officers moved in. The board member stepped back once, then twice. His foot hit the chair behind him. He steadied himself, and for a brief moment, it looked like he might comply. Then something unexpected happened. He reached into his jacket again, but this time slowly, deliberately. Everyone reacted at once. The officers shifted. The attorney stepped aside. Richard froze. The deputy didn't move. The board member pulled out a small USB device, and placed it on the table, right next to the bridge keys. Then said one sentence. You should see what's on it before you make any decisions. The room went completely silent. Even the sirens outside seemed distant now. The deputy stared at the device, then at the board member, and asked him what it contained. The board member didn't answer. He just looked toward the bridge entrance, where headlights suddenly appeared across the road. Multiple vehicles arriving at once. But these weren't sheriff units. These were unmarked county vehicles. And the moment they stopped outside the bridge, the deputy's radio crackled, and what he heard made him immediately reach for his phone. The deputy's hand froze halfway to his radio. That small pause changed everything in the room. Because deputies don't hesitate unless something serious just changed. Outside, the unmarked county vehicles stayed parked, engines running, no one stepping out yet, just watching, waiting. Inside the clubhouse, the air felt tighter, like the walls had moved closer. The USB device on the table suddenly felt heavier than anything else in the room. The board member didn't move, not anymore. He was watching the deputy now, carefully, like he was reading for a reaction. The deputy finally pressed his radio. One short message. Then silence. He looked up at the board member, and said nothing for several seconds. That silence stretched too long. Long enough for residents to start whispering again. Long enough for Richard to shift uneasily. Long enough for the attorney to stop breathing properly. Then the deputy spoke. He said the county systems team had flagged unauthorized administrative access tied to bridge control infrastructure. That line landed hard. Administrative access. Not just viewing. Not just monitoring. Control-level access. The attorney immediately shook his head again, faster this time, insisting it wasn't possible. But nobody responded to him. Not even Richard. Because everyone was focused on the board member now. The deputy stepped slightly closer to the table, and asked him one more time, "What is on the USB device?" The board member finally spoke. Quiet. Controlled. He said it contained proof of authorization. That phrase didn't match anything official. It sounded prepared. Rehearsed. Almost like it had been used before. The deputy didn't accept it. He asked who authorized it. The board member hesitated, just long enough to feel wrong, then said it came from internal county liaison communication. That was the second mini-twist. Because county liaison communication would never exist in HOA channels, or private USB storage. The deputy immediately turned toward one of the arriving county vehicles outside, like something had just connected. Something he already suspected. The attorney stepped forward slightly, trying to speak, trying to regain control of the narrative, but the deputy raised a hand again, silencing him without words. Then the deputy made a decision. He instructed officers to secure the USB device immediately. That triggered movement. 2 officers approached the table. Carefully. No rush. The board member didn't resist. But he also didn't relax. Instead, he leaned back slightly. And that's when something unexpected happened. The USB light flickered. Once. Then twice. A small blinking indicator appeared, like it had just been activated remotely. The room noticed it instantly. A resident near the back stepped away from the wall. Another muttered that it wasn't plugged into anything, but it was transmitting. The deputy noticed too. His posture changed immediately. He stopped the officers mid-reach, and ordered everyone away from the table. Fast. That urgency hit the room like a shockwave. People backed up. Chairs scraped. The attorney looked genuinely alarmed now. Not legal alarm. Technical alarm. The board member finally spoke again, calmer than before. He said no one should touch it until verification completes. That sentence made no sense in normal context, but sounded very specific in technical context. The deputy asked what verification. No answer. Instead, the USB device stopped blinking, just as quickly as it started, then went dark, completely. No light, no signal, no indication. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Outside, one of the unmarked vehicles finally opened its door. A man stepped out. No uniform, but carrying official identification. He walked toward the clubhouse entrance, and paused before entering, like he was confirming what he was seeing inside. Inside, the deputy received another message over radio. This time, he didn't hide his reaction. His expression tightened instantly, and he turned toward Richard. Not the board member. Richard. That detail caught everyone's attention, because Richard was not the problem figure in the room. At least not until now. The deputy asked Richard a direct question. When was the last time HOA financial systems were audited internally? Richard answered immediately. He said they had requested audits multiple times, but they were delayed, repeatedly, by administrative interference. That wording mattered. Administrative interference. The deputy nodded once, then said something that made the room shift again. The county had discovered mismatched authorization layers between HOA filings and recorded infrastructure permissions. That meant overlapping control, or conflicting authority structures, which should never exist. The attorney finally spoke again, this time softer. He asked if this meant criminal exposure. The deputy didn't answer directly. Instead, he said multiple agencies were now involved. That was enough. The room went completely still again. Even the sound outside felt distant. Then the man from the unmarked vehicle finally entered. He looked at the deputy first, then at the board member, then at the USB device, and said one sentence. That device should not exist in any active system environment. That sentence changed everything again, because it confirmed something no one had said out loud yet. This wasn't just unauthorized access. It was system-level manipulation. The board member's expression changed slightly. Not fear. Not shock. Recognition. That was worse. The deputy immediately asked who he was. The man identified himself as County Systems Oversight, and said they had been tracking irregular bridge access activity for weeks. Weeks. That detail rewrote everything again. The toll booth wasn't the beginning. It was just what got noticed. The deputy asked if the bridge owner had been involved. All eyes shifted toward me again. The systems officer looked directly at the deputy, and said the ownership transfer was legitimate. But the access control layer attached to the bridge infrastructure had been duplicated externally. That meant someone had created a parallel control path, a shadow system. The attorney stepped back again. Quiet now. No arguments left. The board member finally spoke again. But this time, his voice was different. Lower. Measured. He said the system wasn't unauthorized. He said it was pre-existing. That was the final mini-twist. Because pre-existing systems implied inheritance. Not creation. Not hacking. Inheritance. The systems officer immediately reacted. He asked what he meant by pre-existing, but the board member didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the USB device again, and said something that made the room freeze completely. The bridge was never just sold once. The deputy stared at him. The attorney looked confused. Richard stepped forward slightly, trying to understand, but before anyone could respond, the systems officer's radio suddenly buzzed loudly, and what came through made him turn pale. He looked at the deputy, and said the county database just flagged a second ownership record for the bridge. One that had just been activated. Right now. At that exact moment, the deputy turned toward the window. And outside, the bridge lights suddenly shut off completely.